Brighter Morning with Bo. This is Bo Tiwari, host of Brighter Morning with Bo. You are watching on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and our guest this morning is Dr. James Hospedales. James, I was asking you about the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated, the reason for that is the vaccine divide, that's to say the lack of supply of vaccines to emerging and developing countries. And it is also because of vaccine hesitancy as well in countries that in fact have gotten the vaccine. So in South Africa, where they have the supply of vaccine, the vaccination rate is under 40%, it's 35%. So that is a problem. So you address the issue of the vaccine inequity. What about this issue of vaccine hesitancy? I want to address two issues. You are saying that the way out of this, and many experts also agree with you, is really to vaccinate everybody. And you are using the example of measles to show that that is how we got out of it then. And this is no different really. It's just a new virus. It's just a new mutation. And we can get rid of it like that. But how do we address this issue? Well, first of all, I want to say the more people we have unvaccinated in the world, the more likely we are going to have more and more mutations, right? A proliferation of mutations. And then the second thing that we want to address is how do we get those people who are resisting vaccination to understand the importance of getting vaccinated in order to help their countrymen and the human race basically to survive this particular pandemic and to be able to manage it.
Thanks, Bo. I think you rightly pointed out that, the low vaccination that we have in the world is in two parts. One is availability of vaccine, and I would like to repeat what I said earlier, that those who hold the patents and the know-how really need to transfer that so that we can have generic vaccines manufactured elsewhere, so that the availability gap is addressed, because many people do want to be vaccinated, need to be vaccinated. Health workers in many parts of the developing world still don't have access to vaccine, and that's really an important part of the solution. In addition to vaccines, and we'll dive into that, the other measures do need to be kept up while the virus is circulating. The mask, the distancing. And I want to stress one other point that doesn't get hammered enough here, and that is the issue of what I call closed air space. And I'll illustrate it by a story of Auntie Rosie. Auntie Rosie is an old lady who lived in Woodbrook, and she was doing pretty good. She was independent, she was vaccinated, and she was a nice lady. So somebody came to visit Auntie Rosie, and she took them inside and made them a cup of tea, and 2 weeks later, Auntie Rosie was dead because the visitor gave her COVID. Auntie Rosie should have talked to that person in the gallery, because inside of a closed air space, especially if your windows are not open, the virus is going to be hanging in the air. The same way a little bit of cigarette smoke will hang around in a closed room, or somebody's gas, if they pass some gas and you smell it, that's the same way the virus is waiting in the air for you to inhale it. So the issue of closed air spaces is one that is not being stressed enough in the public messaging. We're talking about watch your distance, wear your mask, get vaccinated. We're not talking about closed air spaces. And that's an important way the virus is transmitted. So my point here is that in addition to the vaccination, which we're going to talk a bit more about now in detail, the other measures really need to be stressed and continued, and closed air space is one of them. So if somebody comes to visit you at home and you're living alone, Talk to them in the gallery. Talk to them outside. Don't carry them inside and make them a cup of tea. They may be giving you something that you don't want. Um, Vaccine hesitancy or vaccine inquiry. You know, as long ago, when I was at CARFA, I attended a meeting of the International Association of Public Health Institutions in Rome, and a new report had just been launched from WHO. It was chaired by a colleague of mine who was the head of the Finland Public Health Institute, looking at this issue. At the time, I had not given it a lot of thought, so this was a very thought-provoking session because WHO then went on a couple of years later to name this as one of the top 10 threats to the world. When you think about it, and I grew up with, as a medical student and young doctor, seeing measles, and then we eliminated it, and then some year in the Caribbean, and it was eliminated in the hemisphere of the Americas. But then this issue of people not getting vaccinated, not because of lack of access. The vaccine was there in all the countries in the Americas, between the ministries of health, between Pan American Health, CARFA, and so on. Not because of lack of access, but because of vaccine hesitancy. And it is sad, it saddened me to see that measles came back to the Americas, caused large epidemics, lots of deaths, when this was a disease we had beaten in the Americas and potentially could eliminate in the whole world. That report that my colleague chaired from WHO, chaired the committee that looked at this, pointed out that it's a complex phenomenon. It is context specific. So it depends on the country and it depends on the locality. And there's no single magic bullet that deals with the issue of vaccine hesitancy. You need tailored strategies. These points are important when you think of Trinidad and Tobago and the region. It means that a national strategy of televised announcements will take you so far, and then you hit diminishing returns. And it seems to me that the country has reached that point in terms of getting people vaccinated. And the president of the Medical Association was on the news there saying that one of the reasons new variants are going to keep emerging is because you have such a large number of people unvaccinated here and elsewhere. And once you have that, then the virus has channels it can spread and new mutations to emerge. So there's no magic bullet for this issue of vaccine hesitancy. It is complicated. It is context specific. It's complicated because there are a number of factors driving it. People are genuinely concerned sometimes about safety. Now, especially earlier on when the vaccine was first introduced, and I think that needs to be then addressed in smaller groups, in more local groups, and saying, well, look, we've been giving it out for months and months and months, for more than a year, and so is the case. Here's the information. People are concerned about the side effects. Well, we know a lot more about the side effects now, and those can be explained a lot more carefully. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have about 100 health centers. They all have lists of people who are their catchment population. That's the phrase that's used. If you go to St. George on Oxford Street, they would know, well, we got 35,000 people, so many children. We need to work through that local network where the doctors and nurses and the health officials have more of a knowledge of their local population to have a tailored approach to it. We have leaders of faith groups who don't think or don't believe. You need to work with them. You need to go and talk to them. You can't just tell them on national TV, get vaccinated or else. You need to sit down with people and figure out what it is they're really concerned about. Point out to them what it is in scripture that says it makes sense to be vaccinated, and it is sense because you're going to be protecting people who are very vulnerable and people who are going to die if they don't get this thing. And as a Christian, if you're a Christian, you should be doing this, and there's a biblical basis for it. But you can't do that easily at a national level. You have to be tailored and context specific. You have other groups who have philosophical objections and freedom. Well, I tend to be a bit liberal myself in my basic values. and then you run up against this issue, well, should you make people? Should you mandate it? Well, to go to school in Trinidad and Tobago and much of the Caribbean, there are laws that say you must be fully vaccinated. As far as I'm concerned, as an experienced public health official, we should have done that a long time ago, and we should not have allowed schools to partially reopen where unvaccinated children are going to school. We should have extended the existing provisions for requirements for vaccination to all children and all teachers if you're going to school.
All teachers,
Because that, what happened a few weeks
that is the
ago, is
problem.
part of what is fueling the big
They
wave.
played the politics with the teachers, with the health negative effect results with the children. And I mean, to me is inexcusable. I railed against it when I heard about it here, right here on this program.
My daughter, who's a teacher, sat at the dinner table when that news came out, and she said, "But Daddy, here's what's going to happen." And she just pointed out the chain of events that would lead us to where we are now. So as far as I'm concerned, that was a mistaken policy. Now, as soon as you're going to make somebody do something, it raises up questions. And it raises up questions of the ethics of it. And is the benefit of this move going to outweigh the harm that might be caused by it? Because some people have concerns about safety, and a very, very small number of people who are vaccinated have some adverse effects. And I think from an ethical point of view, the benefits of vaccination, in this instance, say we're talking about the school children, and the blocking then of the transmission to their elder relatives who are going to likely get more serious disease, be hospitalized and die, that benefit outweighs any potential likely harm. The other reason to think about it, to require it for school children and for public sector workers, and I think those are two big groups, is that we're at the point of overwhelming the health system. And some of the nurses and doctors who work in the system will tell you it's actually already overwhelmed. And so if you're going to completely overwhelm your existing system, that's another reason for saying, you know what, we need to take this more serious measure of mandating or requiring vaccines for the school children and for public sector workers. Now some people don't like that message, and then you need to go and ask, well, why? What is the reason why? And again, it's context specific. It needs to be tailored to understand why particular groups are worried. I had a very educated colleague say, well, you know, last year in 2020, we didn't have vaccine and they only had a few deaths. And look, 2021, we have 2,000 deaths and the vaccine has rolled out. Funny, eh? And you need to reason with somebody who's thinking like that, because you can understand how somebody may say, well, last year we had no vaccine and few deaths. This year we have vaccine and plenty deaths. But you need to explain and talk it through. Last year we had much less transmission. We had serious lockdowns and the virus hadn't penetrated greatly yet. But by 2021, there was a lot more transmission and a lot more transmission to vulnerable groups. And the last couple of months, it's been a sustained wave, and now we have a big peak. And so that's why we have more deaths, my friend, and reason with them. And that is hard to do at a national sort of level. You have others who are mistrustful, and for good reason. There have been bad experiences in the past, not here maybe, but elsewhere, where people have been used in experiments that were not ethically set up. And those memories remain, and people need to be allowed to express those fears and have it discussed, talk it through. It's going to make women infertile. It's a plan to kill people of a particular race. These things need to be confronted and talked through, some of these myths. The role of social media. Now, I started a little experiment. I began on one of my computers to Google particular things. It is amazing how fast these platforms narrow you to a particular line of thinking. So if you start asking about is this virus going to cause, is the vaccine going to cause infertility? Is it an experiment on people? In no time at all, the suggestions that then keep coming at you is more and more along those lines. So you end up in an echo chamber that is telling you a particular alternative set of news that's not based on science and not based on fact. And I was surprised at how fast it happens.
All right. Now,
So that is another feature.
I want to intervene at this point because that is an important issue. This social media issue is becoming a very, very disturbing thing. And right now we have Facebook under serious scrutiny globally, but more particularly in the United States, for the manner in which they cause harm on things like Instagram, but also on Facebook and so on. And what you said there is very important because if you ask an intelligent question in which you are seeking knowledge on Facebook, you get a range of sources that will help to enlighten you. But if you have a question rooted in ignorance, the ignorant misinformation will coalesce around you and create a universe of misinformation for you. Now, that factor, I think, is something that we have to deal with at the source. We cannot have these algorithms programmed like that to simply reinforce misinformation because of individual ignorance, which is hostile to education, enlightenment, and information distribution. And therefore, we cannot have these institutions like Facebook and other institutions like that pandering to these interests and therefore creating divisions and disturbances in the sphere of information. And I just wanted to have my say on that and to let you respond to that, because that is a very disturbing trend and it has to be dealt with at the source, because the source is the design of these global institutions to coalesce information and misinformation without assessment around questions asked, whether they are reasonable questions or questions rooted in ignorance. So the answers and the coalescing of information or misinformation does not clarify. It simply reinforces ignorance. We cannot allow that and say that it has to do with freedom. That is hostile to freedom.
Well, Bo, you're speaking very strongly. I could see you have a strong feeling about this, and understandably so, because, as you say, it's almost hostile to freedom. With you think you're free, and so you can me and I and what I want and can be met. And these platforms, they do that. And it's not just Facebook. They all do it. If you like adventure movies and you punch a few of those on Netflix, those are the suggestions that keep coming at you. You don't get comedy, you don't get romance, you just keep getting adventure movies. If you were talking to a friend or talking to somebody else who's a bit more experienced, they'll say, well, those are not the only things, there are other things. But that doesn't happen with these programs. And I don't know exactly what the answer to this is. My son, Timothy, is a professor of artificial intelligence. He's coming home for Christmas, we hope. And this is one of the things I really want to discuss with him. How does one construct systems that are able to say, well, this line of information is not the only one. Or else you end up in an echo chamber, or you end up with a particular thing coming at you all the time. And if that's all you're seeing and hearing, then that's what you get brainwashed. So you're right. The freedom is illusory.
You end up in a domain of reinforced ignorance, and that cannot be good for freedom. because freedom starts with freedom of thought, And I want to say something about artificial intelligence. The word artificial is important, but intelligence is the key word. All right? It's artificial intelligence. It is intelligence at work outside the human brain. Created, perhaps, designed, developed by the human brain, but it is intelligence outside the human brain. And you cannot use what is meant to be, additional intelligence capacity outside of the human brain in a machine, in an algorithm, in whatever, that then contributes to ignorance, that then contributes to divisiveness, that then contributes to creation of a situation in which a person is locked into a prison of disinformation and misinformation, ignorance peddling. And that is ethically and morally wrong. And big companies like Facebook and all those entities that are involved, including the academics who are involved in the industry for the creation of these artificial intelligence systems, need to be held accountable for this thing. You cannot have a runaway horse like that in this particular domain and realm of human activity. So I have strong views on it, and I am willing to take on the world on this issue, because there is a lot of pandering taking place by intellectuals and academics all over the world on these issues because of the power of these institutions.
Well, I think you have a lot of reason for deep concern, and many thoughtful people are also deeply concerned that the way some of these systems behave. Now, let's be clear too that artificial intelligence programs are not going to go away.
No, they're going to be here. That's why we need to intervene now, yeah.
They contribute already a lot to how our societies work, and to the smoothness of a lot of different things that behind the scenes you don't even realize, including the promulgation of misinformation and disinformation. In this instance, we're talking about COVID, and we're talking about the vaccines and vaccine hesitancy. And I was explaining you, I was surprised. If you start Googling a particular thing, then you get more and more of that. Yes. And in no time you end up, and so your freedom, you end up in I don't know the answer to this, Bo. I think it is something to be challenged and to ask for accountability and for showing that these systems are not going to foster that kind of ignorance and divisiveness. There are other aspects to it. For example, because I have family who work in it, artificial intelligence doesn't become artificially intelligent by itself. You have to train it.
Yes, that's right.
If you have a new program to do something. And so the examples that you use for training are important. Or else you end up with biases in how the thing is deciding or making particular conclusions. So care needs to be taken at multiple levels, that the artificial intelligence doesn't run amok, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm going to have to take a break now, but when we come back, we will show the clips and I'll ask you to comment. I just want to make this point, which is that all of these things are part of what we call the emerging knowledge system that is evolving before us because of the link between knowledge and technological capability. And we can't say that we are building knowledge systems in the world, and then these knowledge systems contribute to massive or pervasive ignorance through misinformation, or we create knowledge systems that lead to narrowness of perspectives and hardening of positions on the basis of narrowness of perspectives in the world system for the world population. That is wrong. It is morally wrong. It is ethical misconduct in my view. And these things have to be addressed. And these are world issues that have to be addressed. And if people in the developed world do not raise them, I think we in the developing world have to raise them so that we talk some sense into these people. But we break now for commercials, and when we come back, we'll look at 3 clips, and we'll let Dr. Hospedales speak to those clips. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. I'm Bo Tiwari. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Lifetime Solutions, where you can trust your roof to us. Our services include custom fabrication, steel framing, roofing installation, on-site roll forming, roofing maintenance and services. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionstt.com. Lifetime Solutions. You can trust your roof to us. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionstt.com.
As businesses adapt to the new normal, let Magic Mist take care of your cleaning and sanitization needs with our COVID-19 BSCAI internationally certified technicians. With over 43 years of protecting the health of our nation, you can trust us to ensure your building remains safe, healthy, and functional. Give us a call today at 638-6675 or 332-5522. Magic Mist Services Limited, your total facilities management solutions provider.
Feel the joy and love this time of year with MCTV and U975 FM by donating non-perishable items, personal care for all ages and gender, baby items and toys clearly labeled with age and gender. Drop-off zones are located at RCN Office, Guayamere Link Road, Charlieville, 5 buildings after Holiday Foods, northbound. Super Quality Supermarket, 3 locations, Macoya, Chaguanas, and Couva. Drop-off have already begun and continue all the way to the 20th of December 2021. Make a difference this Christmas with MCTV and U975 FM.
The universal message of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Join me 3 p.m. every Friday on Multicultural Television as we discuss the issues from the perspective of Islam and Muslims. Let us unravel our culture and our history as we cultivate peace through dialogue in multicultural Trinidad and Tobago. Time is drawing nigh. It is high time we face the reality only on Muslim Reality.
Welcome back. This is Brighter Morning with Bo, and my guest is Dr. Hospedales, leader of Earthlink. And before we get to him, we will, both of us, look at these video clips. This morning, these 3 clips were on CNN, so we are drawing on CNN 5 o'clock news coverage, 5 a.m. news coverage this morning. So we will start with the medical leader in the United States, and we will hear what he has to say.
You know, you are too dignified an individual to have to respond to Ron Johnson. I will leave his comments about HIV/AIDS to the side. And let's talk about Omicron. My adult children live in New York. They've been screenshotting and sending me info on Omicron. It's really frightening because it feels like it is the next sort of wave of the pandemic, and it feels kind of unstoppable. how much more dangerous is the Omicron variant than Delta?
Well, it's a really important question, Joy, and there are actually three critical unanswered questions about Omicron. Is it more transmissible? Is it more dangerous? And how effective are our vaccines against it? But I want to caution people against jumping to conclusions too quickly, because there will be anecdotes that come out, small bits of data, but we have to actually look at the data in aggregate, laboratory data, clinical data, to fully understand the answers to these questions. I get that people are scared and tired. It's been 22 months, so we've been dealing with this. And when you hear news like this, you think, gosh, is this ever going to end? But what I want to say to everyone out there is, number one, this will end, this pandemic, and we are much better off now than we were in March 2020. This is not about going back, because even with Omicron, we have tools that prevent spread that we know work: masking, hand hygiene, testing, is a layer of precaution. We also know that our vaccines, even though we're trying to figure out how effective they are, they will have some effectiveness against the Omicron variant, especially for those who get boosted, which is why we're encouraging people to do so.
Okay, let's talk about that. Right, I got my booster. I'm very excited to get it. And then the next variants came out, moved for like a hot minute, and now Omicron. Are the booster shots as protective against Omicron as we at least assumed they were against Delta?
Well, so that is a question that we have to figure out. But here's what we have seen with every variant to date, that when you actually get these vaccines, what happens is you boost your immune response in a way that actually helps you protect against the new variant. But when you get that booster, when you're fully vaccinated and when you get a booster on top of that, you boost your vaccine levels, your antibody levels, rather, to really high levels. And that's important because you can actually overcome some of the immune evasion that you see with certain variants if you get antibody levels and the rest of the immune system revved up. That's why we're encouraging people to go out and get that booster. It gives you an extra layer of protection. Think of it, Joy, as having a bigger army, a bigger number of soldiers, a larger number of soldiers in your body that are ready to take on that variant. Even if it's hardier, you've got more soldiers to protect you.
Do you agree with Dr. Vin Gupta, who's our friend of the show, who said that it would be simpler if the language that the administration used is that to be fully vaccinated, you need all 3 shots. Instead of saying get a booster, saying 3 shots means you're fully vaccinated.
Yeah, so I understand Dr. Gupta's point, and he's a wonderful doctor and a good friend. But what I would say is that the CDC, they are the ones who make the definition about what's fully vaccinated, and they are actually looking at the data closely to determine if and when that definition should change to include the 3rd shot. We still know that people who get those 2 shots of Moderna or Pfizer, the dose in J&J, that they do have some good initial protection, but that protection does wane over time, which is where the booster is really helpful. So they will keep us updated on when they change the definition. But the bottom line is right now, if you are 6 months out from your Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, please go get boosted. If you're 2 months out from J&J, you can get boosted.
You made.
All right, we saw that one. That was the wrong clip. That came from MSNBC. There was one in which Dr. Murthy spoke on CNN this morning. That is the one in which he talked about specifically the Omicron, but still it's valuable. Let's see what the second clip says.
As the world waits for the impact of the Omicron coronavirus variant against current vaccines, countries where vaccines are prevalent are losing patience with those who haven't gotten the jab. Germany, in the midst of a big COVID surge, has just announced it is banning unvaccinated people from all but the most essential businesses. They'll also face contact restrictions in private settings. In South Africa, where Omicron is fast becoming the dominant variant, the premier of the country's most populous province is urging people to get vaccinated immediately amid what he called a situation of great concern. And in the coming hours, US President Joe Biden will lay out his plans for those reluctant to get the shots ahead of a possible winter surge.
Okay, and let's look at the 3rd clip, if you don't mind, the one from South Africa. I hope we got the right one.
In a world fatigued by waves of COVID-19, now renewed fear. In South Africa, scientists identifying a troubling new variant of the virus that is dominating infections here.
A variant of serious concern, which is now driving this spike in numbers.
More than 30 mutations, say scientists, in the spike protein alone. It's a worrying sign. Scientists are working in labs like this one in South Africa, scrambling to confirm if the variant evades immunity from previous infections or, crucially, if it weakens vaccine efficacy. Definitive answers could take weeks.
We think it may be a more transmissible virus and it may have some immune escape. Now, we don't know that for sure, but that's what it looks like.
The European Commission has today proposed to member states to activate the emergency brake on travel from countries in southern Africa.
But even without clear answers, the world is shutting its doors. Countries all across the globe rapidly banning travellers from parts of Africa. They say to curb the spread of the variant. Now thousands are likely stranded. In Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam, hundreds of passengers from South Africa forced to sit on the tarmac for hours after landing, then crowding in a COVID testing site after the Netherlands bans travel from South Africa. The International Air Transport Association saying restrictions are not a long-term solution. They've already lost billions to the pandemic. And anger in South Africa, where officials call the bans draconian.
Welcome back. This is Brighter Morning with Bo, and we are talking to Dr. James Hospedales, a public health specialist of many, many years' experience and with tremendous knowledge and practical experience in the field. We looked at those three clips, James, together. I wonder if I could have your freewheeling comments on them, and let's see if we can apply them to the situation in Trinidad and Tobago and globally also, because we are having panic reactions and knee-jerk reactions globally. All right, everybody is acting politically. They started with this thing saying, let's follow the science, but now all the decisions are really political decisions. What they are doing is trying to satisfy the populations at home and to give them comfort. And we are seeing a situation there with the travel bans, but we are also seeing in Germany, and this has happened in Austria and other places, in which basically they are limiting access of the unvaccinated to public places. All right, so let's talk about that a little bit, and I give you all the time in the world.
Thanks, Bo. And I won't have all the time in the world because I've got to do some other things this morning.
Yeah, we close in a couple of minutes, actually.
I think the first of those clips, raised up the key questions. Is this Omicron variant? And let me say what I said earlier, there will be other variants. So there needs to be a more measured response and not knee-jerk. Is it more transmissible? Is it more dangerous? That is it more deadly? And how is it performing in terms of vaccines? And I guess Dr. Etienne, the director of PAHO, said recently, one of her nightmares is that the situation with a lot of unvaccinated people in the world continues for months and months until a variant emerges that ducks completely the vaccine. That is a really serious consideration and a compelling reason why the stuff we talked about earlier needs to be addressed: vaccine availability and vaccine hesitancy. So my thinking is that since it's already becoming the dominant variant in South Africa, and it's already spread to more than 20 countries, some of which closed their borders after the virus was with them, the new variant, it's pointless, is that it is more transmissible than the regular, the former COVID, the original COVID. And this is what happens. A more transmissible strain takes over, as is sort of commonsensical, that if it's more transmissible, it will become the dominant strain where you have a lot of unvaccinated people. Is it more dangerous? That remains to be seen. My sense is that no, it is not a more deadly variant, at least not very much so. And it's not clear whether it will be evading vaccines. Um, being vaccinated protects. It's like wearing a seatbelt. A seatbelt is not a guarantee that you will survive a crash, but it greatly reduces your risk of hospitalization and death if you're wearing a seatbelt in a car when it has a crash. So I think some of the countries that shut their borders, the Netherlands, I've seen other reports that they have now documented that the virus was with them, the new Omicron variant, even before South Africa declared, looks like we've got a new variant. So the horse was out of the barn, or whatever phrase you want to use, some time before. And so the vaccination becomes really important to world security, to Trinidad and Tobago and the region's security, health security. Now, one of the phrases was used that, this is 30 mutations, and that sounds, oh my goodness, but 30 mutations, well, you don't know what it means. So yes, this is of concern, but you have to look and see, does it make it more transmissible, more deadly, or is it making it more likely to evade vaccination? The third shot to boost immunity and that whole debate, I have to say personally I have some issue with it because so many people haven't even gotten a first dose of vaccine. And that's not good. And the solution to that in large part is to what we were touching on earlier, to transfer the capability to manufacture these vaccines to other countries that desperately need the vaccine and can't get it. Vaccination, to repeat, it doesn't mean that you can't get the COVID virus, but like wearing a seatbelt, it does mean that you're less likely to be hospitalized and very much less likely to die. And we see that in the regular reports that the ministry is putting out here in Trinidad and Tobago, that the vast majority of people now who are hospitalized and who are dying from COVID are not vaccinated. And that's an important message. You can begin to calculate that vaccination has saved a lot of lives. One estimate in the States is over 1 million lives have been saved. And you could do the same here, that hundreds of lives have been saved or deaths avoided because of vaccination. And the longer we continue to have a large part of the population that's unvaccinated, the more you have this risk of deaths and spread to people who you don't want. So the Germans and others really looking to get very tough on this is understandable. I go back to the point I made earlier. You have to think about the ethical considerations and freedoms. And from my point of view, the benefit outweighs the harm of requiring vaccination for school children, for example, or requiring vaccination for public sector workers. The other thing in the ethical balance is, are we completely overwhelming our health system if we continue with so many people unvaccinated? And that seems to be the case. So that's another argument for stronger measures with proper communication that addresses some of the concerns that people have, as we were saying earlier, Bo.
All right, I'm going to ask you two questions, and you got to give me a quick answer for this because we've got to close now. One is, do you think that we need to do the best we can to create a vaccination bubble? That is to say, by making it mandatory to show your vaccination card to be part of any kind of public gathering or engagement of economic and social activities in any public place where people are gathered, so that you limit that to the vaccinated and you put pressure on the unvaccinated? And secondly, do you think we need to go to legislation to solve this matter once and for all? Quick response, though, James.
Well, I went out for dinner last night. It was my daughter's birthday, and we were required to show proof of vaccination in order to sit down and have something to eat. So I think that is going to be the norm, to have these kinds of safe zones. In practice, it's really difficult to fully enforce it. With the lifting of the state of emergency here, the person who is vaccinated and has a card goes into the bar or an establishment and then buys a drink and takes it outside for their friend or partner who is not vaccinated. This is the nature of our society, so it's very difficult to manage that. And then that brings to the issue of mandatory vaccination. And I've already stated, I think, the benefits of that for school children and the wider population outweigh any potential harms. And I'm in favor of that. And we already have it in place for lots of other transmissible diseases, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, measles, mumps, rubella. You must be vaccinated against those to get into school. To me, it's an extension of that principle and that practice to extend that to the COVID vaccination required for schools. Unless and until we do that, we will continue to be dealing with it halfway, and we will continue to see a lot of transmission and deaths, and the nightmare possibility that you could have a new variant emerge that is resistant to vaccines.
Dr. James Hospedales, thank you so much for a thoughtful, reflective, and meaningful conversation based on experience and knowledge. We thank you very much for your expertise and for sharing your time and expertise with us. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. I am Bo Tiwari. Have a good weekend and see you on Monday. I want to let you know that my last day on Brighter Morning, last day for Brighter Morning with Bo will be on December 15th. So we'll close off for the year on December 15th. But we will have programs every day, Monday to Friday, until then. Thank you very, very much for watching.